Hey, friends. So I've been talking to and listening to grieving people for a long time now, a long time. And grief existed before this pandemic erupted. There was that sort of competition for the scarce resource of empathy and compassion and acknowledgement and listening that grieving people have been wrestling with forever. One of the things that's happening that we see in our community is people being pissed about all this attention on COVID-19 and especially people talking about grief related to the virus. And I get that, right? Like, people, I mean, think about this even before virus times, like somebody being upset about not getting a spot in doggy daycare and comparing that to the loss of your child. Like, all of that shit's always going to feel terrible. And I feel like what's coming up for grieving people a lot right now is feeling like the comparison is everywhere and that the playing field of grief has been flattened, because everybody is so distressed and everybody is grieving something and everybody is afraid to lose people they care about. And I think that's what's happening, is that people who are living through their own grief feel even more erased, and a lot of times they feel like their grief doesn't matter anymore. It got eclipsed by this wider thing happening. And I just want to say that I see that and I hear that, and it's accurate, right? It's accurate. I have friends whose person died on September 11th, and nobody paid attention to their grief because everybody was paying attention to global grief, countrywide grief. So we've been in situations like this before where a large scale crisis eclipses individual grief. So those of you who are feeling really frustrated about all of the attention that the virus and sort of the pandemic epidemic of grief that is rolling into this culture, those of you who are feeling annoyed and irritated by all of that stuff, I feel ya. And remember that all grief is valid. Doesn't mean that all grief is the same. All grief is valid, which means the person who is having a lot of big feelings around having to cancel their wedding, they get to be sad. They don't get to come to you and say, at least you got to get married even though your husband died, right? Like, nobody gets to say bullshit. Like, that's not cool ever. What I want to stress here is that these are really, really challenging times. And if you came into this pandemic time carrying your own grief, you've probably seen your support drop off a lot. And when we lose support, we start to feel like there's a scarcity of caring and a scarcity of attention and a scarcity of compassion. And right now we're right. People are spread really thin, and they're not showing up even in their perfectly imperfect ways right now. It makes it really hard to have compassion for other people's loss. So a few things we can try here. One is acknowledge the truth to yourself. I love that we're getting so many messages and so many DMs of people saying, I'm so fucking pissed about this because nobody cares about the fact that my baby died, but they're worried about a tiger in the Bronx. It's important to say that stuff and to say it in a place where it's going to get acknowledged and listened to. And we are that place. And we are that place for each other, right? You can always send us messages and talk to us. Join our Patreon where lots of people come together to bitch about how unfair this is, right? Like, there are places to do that. And you can also do that with each other, right? Communities of grieving people tend to be really good at listening without judging and listening without cheering up. So finding places where you can be as pissed off as you are, very, very important. If you're not sure where to find those places, message us. We've got some good ideas, including our own Writing Your Grief course and community, which is made up of awesome people, but other people too, other folks too have places that they've created where you can come and bitch about how hard this is. So that's one thing, find places to tell the truth. The other thing is, as a practice, remembering that that scarcity of compassion that you feel for your grief, that shortage of love and attention and care that you feel, is a symptom of a much larger pattern in which nobody's pain gets addressed or heard or validated in this culture is because we're so shit at listening to pain, right? We're so bad at listening to pain because that's the way we've been taught, right? We've been taught to gloss it over, compare it to somebody else's, say it's not that bad, or fucking rise above. This means that no one is very good at listening to pain, even in the best of days. We see it most clearly in grief, right? Especially in the more out of order or sudden or devastating deaths, right? But that experience of feeling unheard or corrected or judged or glossed over with platitudes, that is just the tip of the pain iceberg. Everybody's carrying pain of some kind. And if we want a community, if we want a world where there is enough love and compassion for you when your baby died, or your sister got sick, or your mom died well before she should have, if we want a world where there's enough compassion for you, we have to start by offering compassion for others. Remember that this does not mean that all grief is the same. You will never hear me say that stubbing your toe is the same as having your leg ripped off. It's not. But both of those pains get to be spoken and they get to be heard. Sometimes you're going to have more capacity than others to listen to the pain of the world. That's cool, right? I close my doors and my windows and I close my brain a lot to the pain of the world, because if I start getting pissy and I'm like, how dare you? That's my cue that I am feeling lonely and unheard, and I need to close ranks and go in and find the support that I know exists and reach out to my community, my personal community, where I can say those things. So we loop back full circle here. One, absolutely, it makes sense that you are pissed off at all the attention that the virus and the grief that is coming into the cultural conversation. You have every right to be pissed off at that, and we want to acknowledge and validate that because it is real. And find places where you can talk about that, because I don't want you carrying that frustration through your day with you, unspoken or unheard, because that's not going to help, right? Rehearsing outrage is not helpful. Sharing outrage and feeling validated and heard is helpful. So find those places to do that. And the third thing, as a practice, notice when you're feeling stingy about offering kindness or compassion to others. Not right, not wrong, right? I am often stingy feeling. I feel you, right? But the trick here, the practice here, is to notice when you are feeling it and choose a different response. If we want a world where there is enough compassion for somebody who stubbed their toe all the way up to somebody whose leg was ripped off, for somebody who is really, really sad that they can't go to their kid's high school reunion or high school graduation, and you're like, my kid is dead, right? If we want enough compassion for that whole continuum, we've got to start seeding that compassion in the world. Not always easy, friends. We can do it, though. We're already doing hard things. All right, that's it. Love you. Talk to you later.